Everybody, welcome back. We are live with our Meaningful Monday live stream. Welcome to the show. And this is, I guess, officially a show now. I keep saying that, but I don't know if it actually is. Now it is. We just did it. It's called a show now. So, welcome. And today we're talking about imposter syndrome. So, if you have questions or comments or anything like that you want to chime in, please feel free to throw your comments or questions in the chat. I'll be happy to talk about them, address any questions you guys might have, talk more deeply about it, because it's something that we often go through as business owners. Anytime you're changing careers, anytime you're dealing with anything, your first job all the way down to your last one, you might have imposter syndrome dealing with it. And so something a lot of people deal with, both men and women, and it's a really prevalent issue nowadays. So I want to talk about that tonight. I got some questions to answer about that already, the people have emailed about, and I want to answer questions live if you guys have them. So please feel free to throw them in the chat. Before we do that, quick PSA about not imposter syndrome. It's about COVID vaccines. Talking to a friend over the weekend, and his wife is in healthcare. I know a lot of folks in healthcare, and there's a shortage right now of vaccines in terms of how many they ordered compared to how many they need. Obviously, things have been kind of messed up over the last year or longer. But if you're not a medical professional, hold off and let them get theirs first. Let the frontline folks get theirs first, so that way we can get them later. Because if you're staying in your house, you don't need a vaccine. You're not going anywhere. What's the point, right? Just let folks who need them get them first, and then once they've ordered enough to suit everybody, we can all jump in and do that. But that's just a little quick PSA there. So yeah, let's talk about imposter syndrome. It's a quick story. I had two clients 2 weeks ago that within like a couple hours of each other, and these are two completely different women, two completely different lives, completely different people. There are different points in their life. Even one is actually a med student. She's about 22. And the other is going to her third career. She's like 47. And within 3 hours of each other, they had the exact same issue, which was imposter syndrome. The medical student was trying to adjust to being a medical student and figure out how to align with the fact that she's going to be a doctor. And she wanted to build the confidence to be an effective physician and what that looks like for her. This other lady who's in her 40s, she's trying to move into her own business. She's trying to start from scratch. And she's been an employee for a couple different companies over the last years, and she wanted to start her own thing, but she had imposter syndrome about how to actually do this and how to start a business as a marketing professional. Now, this is a really common thing, but let's talk about what imposter syndrome actually is real quick. Generally, imposter syndrome manifests as lack of confidence or lack of feeling like you're the thing you're telling people you are. So it's really feeling like a fraud a lot of times. And this happens a lot of times when you're changing careers or moving to a different level in a career, or changing jobs in general, or coming out of school, like the med student situation. So I know I dealt with it myself personally when I became a coach. I was like, well, I'm telling people I'm a coach, and I have the training, I have the schooling for it, but I don't feel confident as a coach yet. I had it when I was an attorney, right? Jumping in and becoming an attorney after law school, which doesn't really prepare you for that mentally, is a really big jump. And I think a lot of folks go through this kind of thing. Your first professional job out of school, whatever school that is, whatever job that is, you may deal with imposter syndrome. And how do you deal with that, right? So the definitions on the screen. How do you deal with imposter syndrome? How do you deal with it's really misalignment of your identities, right? Who you believe you are, or who you have been up until this point, is misaligned with who you're telling people you are, who you need to be to the public. But in reality, people are going to respond to you the way that you tell them to respond to you. If you walk into a room and you introduce yourself to people who don't know you, people are going to believe whatever you say, essentially, unless you say like, you're a celebrity, in which case probably not really going to work. But if you walk into a room and say, hey, I'm a physician, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm an engineer, people are not going to be like, no, you're not. We don't believe you. That's you. That's all in your head, right? It's a mindset thing. And it's really coming to terms with the fact that, yes, you are this thing now. And the question is, at what point do you go from believing you're something to actually being that thing, right? At what point do you go from building the skills, the knowledge, the experience, all the way to actually confidently walking around and being like, I'm owning this thing that I am right now. I am a lawyer. I am a doctor. I am a coach, right? How do you do that? And it's really takes a lot of work sometimes, a lot of really just doing that thing for a while to build confidence. That's one way to do it. It might just be a time question. The other thing may just be a self-reflection type thing, right? What's holding you back from believing that you are that thing, right? What's holding you back from believing that you have the knowledge, the skills, the ability to do the thing that you really want to do, that you're claiming to the world that you are? So what does that really look like for you, right? And we had some questions come in asking about that, asking about how people deal with imposter syndrome. Okay, there you go. If I'm transitioning to a new position, how can I deal with imposter syndrome? Well, again, building competencies in that actual position, right? Learn what's required in that position. What do you need to do? What are the tasks you have to do? What are the skills you need? What are the mindsets that you need for that? And then look at your past and see where have you done those things before, even in a micro situation, right? What are situations where you've encountered situations that are like the ones you have to deal with now? May not be exactly the same, but what have you been able to deal with in the past that you can deal with that are similar right now? So let's say you're transitioning from being an attorney to an IT professional. That's what I did, right? Now you may think that those things are completely unrelated, and they are, generally speaking, right? But what's an attorney doing? Research, problem solving, talking to clients, potential clients, and current clients, figuring out what their issues are, figuring out how you can help them, right? You break things down to the core components, and see what aligns with the new position you're going to, or the new thing you're trying to do. For me, those things align directly with IT professionals, right? I was a project manager, so I'm talking to clients. I'm interacting with clients. I'm trying to figure out how to solve the problem that they're trying to solve. How can I help them do what they want to do? And it's a lot of problem solving, a lot of critical thinking. So if you think about it in terms of resumes, it's more of a functional resume situation, more than just the title, right? It matters more about what you're able to do, what you have done actively versus what you call yourself. If you call yourself, there's so many different names nowadays for so many different positions that are exactly the same, right? You're a coordinator versus an assistant coordinator or a manager, and different things. Different companies call different positions the same thing and different things. I don't know if I said that right, but but you know what I'm saying? Like, different titles don't really mean anything anymore because there's so much variance in title. It really comes down to what you've done in that position. Someone at a senior director level in one company, that might just be manager level in another company, or vice versa. So it really comes down to looking at exactly what the tasks are that you're doing and have done, and where do those align with the new tasks you're coming in with, right? Where do those align with what you're going to do in the future? In terms of building confidence, building that competency, it's not so much intellectually knowing it as much as it is knowing it in your heart, right? In like what you really believe. To quote Indiana Jones, it's like you have to ask yourself what you believe, right? Do you believe that you're this thing? If not, what's holding you back from believing that? Why don't you believe that? You have to dig a little deeper and figure out what's holding you back from believing that. Sometimes we hold on so tightly to the thing we were before, we don't know what we are anymore, right? We don't know how closely we align to those beliefs we had before. So it's really a question of understanding where those similarities are with what you've done in the past and what you're going to be doing in the future to answer that question. What other questions do we got? What triggers imposter syndrome? Good question. Different things for different folks. But I mean, again, any situation where you're transitioning from one thing to another, from one position to another, or one part of your life to another part of your life. Sometimes it can be it doesn't have to be professional. It can be in terms of becoming a parent for the first time, right? I mean, so many people are like, I don't feel confident being a parent, right? I'm afraid. We talked about fear last week. It's a fear thing, right? You're afraid of failing at that thing. You're afraid of not doing that thing properly. You're afraid of not living up to expectations. And so again, you're putting expectations on everyone else, when in reality, people are going to respond to you the way you respond to yourself. So as long as you're confidently saying that you're doing this thing and you're doing the things you're doing the best you can at whatever you're doing, it's going to be enough. So imposter syndrome can be triggered by any number of things, but in reality, it's just a misalignment of your internal identity with your contextual identity. And so that's really how you kind of have to realign those things. Working with a coach is a great way to do that. But again, you don't necessarily have to do that. It may take a little longer, but it's really about self-awareness and digging deeper to see what's holding me back from actually owning this thing that I want to be, or that I am. How do I actually make that transition from one part of my life to the new part of my life? And it can be very scary. I'm not saying it's easier said than done, like most things in the world, right? It's easy to say that you're at this thing, or it's easy to say to do this difficult work, but it comes down to really being honest with yourself. And that's another part of things that people aren't always ready to do, is really be honest with yourself and open and that door of self-awareness to say, what's actually holding me back, right? And you may or may not be ready to face that. That's the other part of it too. So it's not always going to be an easy answer. It's a simple process, but it's not easy. What else we got? What if my fear of being a fraud is validated? Okay, so I kind of need a little more information on this one, but validated in what way? And that can come, I guess, a couple different ways, right? What if your fear of being a fraud is validated by you actually doing something wrong, or the fact that you didn't know how to do something that you wanted to do for that particular position or that particular role? Either one of those is possible, and it depends on how you respond to things. I think of the baby example, right? When you're interacting with a baby, and let's say they trip and fall, right? They're going to look to the adult to how the adult reacts. If the adult reacts by like, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay?" Then the baby's going to be like, "Oh, well, I guess this is serious, so I need to start crying." But if you look at kids, they don't always just start crying right away. Sometimes they wait for a response. And then if they get the response that indicates they should be crying or they feel like they should be crying, then they start crying. But if not, then they dust themselves off and keep running again like they did before. And nothing was wrong. So it's kind of that same mentality. People are going to respond to you the way you respond to yourself. So if you make a mistake and you start freaking out like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that's the worst thing ever. Oh my God, I failed at this thing." Then people are going to be like, "Oh, well, that person must have really made a big mistake." But if they don't know enough about your industry, if someone hires you to do a job, there's a reason that they hired you. It's probably because they can't do that job themselves, or they don't have enough time or whatever. But they're trusting you to do a job or to know enough to do that job well. And so if you make a mistake, the best thing you can do is just own it. Not freak out about it, not make it a big deal or a bigger deal than it needs to be. Own it. I mean, if it was a risk to begin with, it goes back to communication. And that's also experiential type of thing. It takes confidence to be able to communicate to a client that here, there's a risk or there are associated risks with this course of action, right? But that's part of doing business. You got to be able to do that. And if you miss a risk or if a risk gets realized at a certain point, just own it. I mean, that's the worst case scenario in that situation is that risk gets realized, but then you own it with the client and say, "Look, here's the risk that we had before. Here's how it was realized. And here's our plan of action. Here's our mitigation plan from this point, if there is possible to have one." But that's, again, how you deal with it is really how people are going to react to it. They're going to react to it the way that you react to it. So as long as you're confident about dealing with it, like, "Look, this is what happened. This risk was realized." Even if it wasn't a mistake, you may interpret it as a mistake, but just because things go wrong doesn't mean the mistake was made. Sometimes just things go wrong because they're out of their control. As long as you know you did the best you could to do what you need to do in that situation, that's all that matters. And so, again, owning it, communicating that to the client, letting them know, or letting yourself know as well, that you did everything you could in that situation, anything a reasonable person could do in that situation to mitigate those risks. And if those risks still happen, if they still come up, so be it. Deal with it, though. Come up with a plan to deal with it. Let the client or yourself and everyone else in the situation involved, all the stakeholders, let them know that you have a plan of action to move forward. It's not just like you're just staying there and just frozen solid because of this one mistake or one risk that was realized. Keep moving forward, but own that confidently. I hope that answers the question there. Any external ways I can deal with imposter syndrome instead of only internally and individually? External as in, interesting question. So, I mean, externally working with someone, a mentor, a coach, your boss, colleagues, I mean, building accountability groups or partners, folks who are going through the same thing you're going through, something similar. It's a really good way to try to combat imposter syndrome, because if you're all going through the same thing, one is knowing that you're not alone in this journey because other people are going through it as well. Camaraderie is a very, very powerful thing in that situation. So I would say that's one thing. Build accountability partners, build those communities that you can tap into and understand that, hey, this is something that I want to deal with and we're all dealing with together, and you guys can hold each other accountable and reinforce for each other. That's one great way to do it. Like I said, a mentor or a coach would be a great way to deal with it as well. But honestly, just doing the thing that you need to do, right? Just keep doing that thing and practicing it, whether you're actively doing it for a client or for a situation that matters in the moment, or where you're doing it just to practice. Practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. So doing it as well as you can always, and trying to hold yourself to a higher standard every time you do it, that can bring amazing, immense value. Because if you keep practicing that thing, you'll get better and better at it. Your confidence will automatically go up and you'll be better at it. Think about driving, for example, for those of you who drive. And I'm hoping relating wise, most people can relate to driving. When I first started driving, I didn't have the confidence that I wanted to have. I remember driving for the first time by myself. I'm not going to say whether I had a license or not at the time, but driving by myself for the first time, I was terrified. What if I get into an accident? What if I make the wrong turn? What if somebody that doesn't see me in their blind spot and it's not even my fault, right? These are all things that go through your head. And I can only imagine what my parents were imagining, but that's a different conversation. But the same thing happens nowadays. I don't even think about it. I hop in the car, get going, right? It's like second nature. It becomes second nature over time because you practice it. You keep doing it over and over again. Repetition builds comfort. And over time, you'll get better and better at it. You'll start taking a little more risks in a good way, mitigated risks and like measured risks, so to speak, and try new things and expanding your abilities with it. Your comfort zone is going to get bigger and bigger over time. That applies in life as much as it is with any one skill. And so it's just a matter of getting yourself out of that comfort zone and expanding your comfort zone to include that thing that you're afraid of or that you have imposter syndrome about. So that's what I would say is just really a lot of practice. It's a long-winded way of saying practice. Yes, absolutely. I think anyone who's changed careers has dealt with imposter syndrome in some form or another. I dealt with it a couple times. I dealt with it as an attorney, first time coming out of law. I mean, backing up even further, I dealt with it as a college student, right? Going from high school to college. I didn't know what the heck I was supposed to do as a college student. I'm like, am I going to do this right? I don't know. Who knows? Let's see what happens and figure it out, right? From a college student to a law student, again, putting pressure on ourselves to be better, to be this thing that we haven't had an experience being before, right? All this fear is built up into kids because when you go to law school, it's going to be a lot of reading, a lot of work, because you're not going to have time for a social life. You're not going to have time for all these different things. And you get tired, like, oh, well, what if I mess up? I don't want to mess up. Like, I'm not a law student yet. I have no idea what that means. And then again, when I became an attorney, working as an attorney, my first day as a prosecutor, I was terrified because I had no clue what the hell to do. I knew the law, but this is not the law. This is procedural. This is being in court, right? How do I stand up? How do I walk? How do I talk to the judge? When do I talk to the judge? Like, what do I need to say here? All these things are not taught to you, right? And you don't have experience with them. Then switching careers again to being a project manager in IT from being an attorney. Again, didn't have an idea what that looked like. No clue, right? And then again, as a coach, right? Walking into coaching class, no idea what to expect. I had less of the imposter syndrome in the class, but when I was done and working as a coach, I was nervous. My first couple of clients, I was actually honestly every client I work with, I'm always nervous the first. Not nervous, but I'm aware the first time I talk with them. The first time I'm going to walk into a coaching conversation, because it matters. It makes a big difference, right? That's a client that I need to make an impact with. I need to make sure that they're responding to me the way I'm responding to them, and vice versa, and that we're actually getting the work done. So it's really about things that matter to you it's a balancing that, wanting to do a great job with knowing you can do a good job, right? And not putting on undue pressure on yourself to do that in such a way that it hurts you, because you can hold yourself back because of nerves and that kind of thing. You can have a really bad experience with a client or with yourself or with colleagues. Imposter syndrome manifests in different ways. The clearest one is obviously the lack of confidence, but it can also result in self-sabotage sometimes, right? And self-sabotage is not the term that you're looking at that I like to use, because it's not really an accurate term. It's more just not knowing how to actually do something properly. And you think that doing that thing properly is going to mess you up. So sabotaging, again, is not really the word I don't like. The reason I don't like sabotage is because it's like intentionally doing something wrong and messing something up, but you're not messing anything up, because in your mind, you're actually helping yourself. You think you're helping yourself. So you're not messing anything up as far as you're concerned. But in the situation, imposter syndrome can manifest as self-sabotage. It can manifest as so many different things, as just having a bad temper or just being unhappy generally, because you don't feel confident being where you are, right? So every little thing, you're on edge. It manifests in a lot of different ways. And so the key is really identifying it and identifying the possibility of it even, and then starting to address it and mitigate it sooner than later. Yes and no. So I think it does affect them differently, but it affects everyone, men and women. I'd say about equally, honestly, in terms of the amount. But it affects them differently. So women have imposter syndrome in a lot of situations that men may not, and vice versa. I was doing a seminar for my old law school a couple years ago, and for law students, and they were transitioning into being lawyers. So the women in the class in the class are like, oh, well, we're kind of dealing with this whole thing of like confidence, and we don't know, like, I don't think the men can understand it. And this guy gets up and is like, actually, I'm dealing with the exact same thing. Like I have a lot of concerns. The same concerns you're talking about, I actually have the same ones too. And they couldn't believe that a guy had the same concerns they did. Now that's not an isolated incident. The difference is though that women are a lot more open about their feelings and about, generally speaking, again, this is a huge generalization. I don't want to generalize, but more often than not, women are more open about their feelings and about what they're experiencing than men are. Men are taught for whatever reason that they can't express their feelings, that they're not supposed to, for example, cry. They're not supposed to show emotion. They're not supposed to be, unmanly, right? And talking about their emotions and their feelings and things that affect them and how they affect them is not cool. It's not something that guys do, right? The whole boys don't cry thing, right? So it affects them differently because they're able to express it differently, right? It's much more acceptable for women to have imposter syndrome than it is for a guy to, for whatever reason. I didn't make the rules. I'm not saying that that's okay or not. I think it honestly, my experience, it happens to both sexes often, very very often, right? It's just a matter of which one talks about it more, and it comes up a lot more for women than it does for men, because men are trying to deal with it on their own. They don't ever talk about it. They don't even talk with their friends about it. So it's definitely affects women and men differently, and how we deal with it becomes different as well. Men try to find other ways and other outlets to deal with it if they do at all, but they never deal with it directly. It's always an indirect outlet, like sports, like going to the gym, or like, I don't know, yelling, having a really bad temper and getting upset about things. Women also have the temper thing. Sometimes they go to the gym, they go running, they do those kind of things, but they can also talk to their girlfriends or their other friends about it, or they can talk to their peers about it sometimes, right? So it affects them similarly, but they deal with it in different ways, if that makes sense. Facing it head on, I think I covered that a little bit earlier, just talking about exactly what to do, right? Work on yourself and really build that self-awareness muscle for yourself to understand yourself better. Understand where it comes from, what's holding you back, what beliefs do you have to overcome to really own that new title, that new label that you want to put on yourself, right? Or maybe take away all the labels in general and just be you. That's another possibility as well. But that's not always possible in corporate America, right? So the key is really just build self-awareness and really build that comfort with whatever it is you're trying to do. Now, whether that's working with a mentor, whether working with a coach, or whether creating a community for yourself or tapping into a community you're already part of to build that kind of support and that kind of confidence with yourself, those are multiple ways to deal with it. But absolutely reach out and talk to somebody about it if you can. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, or other. Reach out and talk to someone about it, right? Understand where this feeling is coming from, where this fear is coming from, because a lot of it's fear driven. Most of it's fear driven in imposter syndrome. It's a fear of looking bad, right? A fear of not being able to live up to those standards that you set for yourself, or you have your clients set for you, or your boss, or your people around you. So really take a hard look at yourself and be prepared for the difficult questions, whether someone else is asking them or you are. But ask yourself the difficult questions. Don't shy away. Don't run away from the difficult questions. That's something we tend to do to try to protect ourselves. But in reality, we're not protecting ourselves at all by not facing those things head on. We're actually hurting ourselves, because the longer we take to deal with it head on, the less able we are to actually overcome that thing. Running away from it is not a way to deal with it. What else we got? If we have no more questions, then any questions from the audience or comments, anything like that, please feel free to throw them in the chat. But yeah, this is just a Q&A question answer session for tonight. I was planning on doing an imposter syndrome seminar last year, a retreat actually. It was supposed to be in Japan, but obviously the COVID had other plans for that. But we are going to be doing some stuff later this summer for those of you who are interested. And I'm planning on doing something, not quite a retreat, because I think retreats are meant to be in person and physically geographically located elsewhere from where you are normally, but it's going to be some kind of a training conversation type thing that we're doing later in the summer. So keep an eye out for that for those of you who are interested. For everyone else, please, I hope this was helpful for some folks. Let me know what you think. Post any questions, comments in the comment section. And if you like the video, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, check us out on YouTube. And thanks again for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. This is our meaningful Monday for today. And I'll see you guys next week. Well, I'll see you on Thursday first, and then I'll see you on next week after that. Take care, guys. Stay safe.